story of a street which has been rejected by a large segment of society, but has not rejected itself. Some call it Pensy, some Death Valley, some the Mecca. Its formal title is Pennsylvania Avenue, Baltimore, a 2.5 mile ribbon of life, light, and depression, stretching from the core of Baltimore City northwest to Druid Hill Park. Before World War II, Pennsylvania Avenue was the visible hub of Negro life and activity in Baltimore, because downtown was more or less off limits to Negroes. Pennsylvania Avenue became the bustling center of the black man's working life and leisure hours. After the war, however, much of the Negro middle class moved out of the area, and businessmen along the avenue, most of them white, began to complain of a decline in sales. South of North Avenue, stores closed. Theaters became movie houses, and many jazz clubs either shut their doors or became bars with jukeboxes instead of live bands. Residences along Pennsylvania Avenue became the exclusive home of poor Negroes with incomes averaging $3,750 for a family of 5. Between 1950 and 1960, the area's population declined by 20%. More and more, the word slum was used to describe what was once a reasonable, healthy community. Few dared to venture into the area at night, so bad was Pensy's reputation as a breeding ground for crime, prostitution, and drug addiction. Pennsylvania Avenue as a viable community has not died. It has deteriorated physically, but spiritually it has become a rallying point for the black man trying to find a sense of identity in the hostile, impersonal world of the 1960s. One of these black men is Walter P. Carter, former laborer, now of Baltimore's Model Cities Agency, and himself a political storm center. For Carter, one of the new breed of leaders in the racial revolution now gripping America, Baltimore's Pennsylvania Avenue is considerably more than what it seems to be on the surface, a ghetto devoid of hope. For Walter Carter, Pennsylvania Avenue has become a symbol of spiritual rejuvenation, the soul of black Baltimore. Its people have changed, he believes, and the change has been for the better. New goals have been established and partially realized, goals that include the growth of racial pride, cultural separateness, community responsibility, and self-sufficiency. Physical evidence of these goals, Carter believes, can be seen along the avenue, long ago written off as another irretrievable slum without a future.
As black people are beginning to get together, that means that we are beginning to identify with things that we have been led to reject. And one of the things that we've rejected has been, of course, ourselves. Another thing has been, for instance, the turf that we live on. And we like to think in Baltimore very much of something that is central to the turf that we live in, and we feel that Pennsylvania Avenue sort of symbolizes this. We rejected it before, we accept it now. And you can see a renewed dedication and commitment to this turf. You can see it in the way people behave. You can see it in the way the men walk straight, with the chins up, the heads up. And now, instead of having process heads, you can find many of us having afro haircuts and bush haircuts, that we are not afraid of ourselves, we're not ashamed of ourselves, we're identifying with our own African roots. We're in Africa, and in Baltimore, we're identifying with our own roots, which were rooted west and east of Pennsylvania Avenue, which we like to call Soulsville.
20 years ago, Walter Carter, like many Southern blacks before him, came north in search of a new life. But it was not long before he was disappointed.
Coming from the South myself, you know, I thought Baltimore was like going to Buffalo, New York, when actually I came out of a small town in North Carolina to Baltimore and found more segregation in one day here than I'd found in 1 year there. Not that I was looking for it, but the cab that took me home, there was a white driver. When I left home, that is my sister's home, to another place, I went on a trolley that was driven by a white driver. The fact that I sat up front instead of in the back only highlighted the problem, because the problem was employment.
Today, 20 years later, some things have changed in Baltimore. Now a black man can be a cab driver or be hired for any of a dozen menial jobs. The employment offices along Pennsylvania Avenue reflect this change. But for Walter Carter and others like him, the signs offering employment for jobs none but the unskilled and largely uneducated want are degrading symbols of the black man's lack of real progress. At the heart of the problem of equal and fair employment is still another problem that goes far deeper. Equal and fair education. Even after a decade and a half of strong federal legislation, Walter Carter believes the black child's education is vastly inferior to that of the white child.
Now, the school system, any white child, if he could make it educationally, he could go any way he wanted to occupationally. It was just a reverse for the black child. And this is no indictment of any individual. It's an indictment of a system that we have inherited from our forefathers who failed to do anything about it. The pledge of the allegiance to the flag is an unreal thing.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
When the kid makes the pledge, part of his pledge is to one nation, indivisible. But we are divided, in fact. And how can we say to black kids in a black school that is dilapidated, deteriorated, and segregated that he's living in one nation, indivisible? And he knows this is a contradiction of the fact that it is around him.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All who? All of everybody else but him. And therefore, I'm saying, based on this beginning in the morning, and based on the fundamental democratic premise that underlies a school system which enables all children to grow to their fullest potentials educationally, which allows all children to maximize themselves educationally. This, again, is a gross contradiction of plainly a lie, because the overwhelming majority of children in the Baltimore public schools today are black children. The overwhelming majority of those black children are being miseducated instead of educated, and this is no fault of their own. And how in the world can you become educated if you don't even know yourself? How can you know anything about knowing anything else? You know, the history of America doesn't reflect the true history of black people. Northwestern High School last year had a lot of trouble out of a young fellow named Harold Dobson, because he wanted Afro-American history. He said, look, I'm about ready to graduate from high school, and I've studied about the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, but tell me about Nat Turner. Tell me about rebels. Tell me about some of my people that I can respect. And people got upset about this thing. But this guy was saying a whole lot, and he's saying it here in Baltimore, and he's saying it today.
Black history, a new subject in Baltimore's education system, so far has found its way into but a single city school. Perhaps symbolically, that school, number 66, is located near Pennsylvania Avenue,
Teachers
where
throughout
the search for
Baltimore have been
identity
attending
is strongest.
a workshop on the Negro History Institute. Boys and girls, you realize that Negroes played a good part, a very important part, in the building of our country throughout the years, not just today, but for many, many years. Negroes have helped to make our country the great place in which to live. Even in one of our biggest magazines that's sold throughout the country, they're featuring articles on great Negroes, past and present. Here's the beginning of a series called The Search for a Black Past. We have much children to be very proud of. I want you to think about this each time you hold your head up and say, I'm proud to be black.
For most Negroes, however, a sense of identity is not learned in school. Instead, the search for cultural and spiritual exclusiveness usually begins on the avenue or in the record stores where the black man's music prevails. The essence of black cultural identity, in fact, is said to exist in the word soul, a term which is synonymous with certain kinds of Negro music. Otherwise, soul is nearly as hard a quality to define as the German Gemütlichkeit, but most describe it as the opposite of hypocrisy, deceit, and phoniness. Walter Carter's definition of soul is somewhat more complex.
This is one thing that the brother said we're not supposed to tell anybody about soul. They said you feel this is an experience. Soul is a lot of emotions and experiences that have been based on something, a history that people have shared in common. It means struggling. It means sacrifice. It meant, and so when John Coltrane played, for instance, Archie Shepp, who's the most vocal black musician in America today, and white musician for that matter, and perhaps any other kind of man who stands in America today, said when John Coltrane played, he said a black man could feel that he was communicating the black man's experience in America from New Orleans on up to right now. Now that's soul.
Comparatively few whites are familiar with the name, much less the music, of John Coltrane and other black artists who embody soul in their utterances. For Walter Carter, however, Coltrane's music is the final word on just what soul means.
Now, if you go into a ghetto, there's some heroes. Bird, X, Train. And John Coltrane, incidentally, died at the age of 40. And he died almost, I think it was a social psychological death because this man felt so much and saw so much. And if you want to know the black mood today, all you have to do is be able to listen and to feel with these great artists who had the guts to break away from the myths and the hypocrisies of America, from its commercialism, who had the strength to stay away and express themselves culturally, to express themselves artistically. And if you want to know what's going on in 1970, 1972, the boys will say, listen to Train. Before he died, he cut some 30 albums. Listen to Listen to A Love Supreme, played rather harshly. Listen to some of this music that is not just a 3-minute record, that is not just a melody written by the man, but is an expression of a people, their struggle, their beauty, their survival in a foreign land, but in a land where a whole new value system has been produced. To talk about John Coltrane in Baltimore could sound like something in its way out, but actually, when I'm talking about the new music, I am not talking about something that is really appreciated and enjoyed by the masses, but it reflects the mood of the masses, like most artists can reflect the mood of the masses. But John Coltrane has specific importance to Baltimore. His last performance was at the famous ballroom, and it was given by the Left Bank Jazz Society, a group of people who have now opened their doors every Sunday for 50 youth of the ghetto area to come there and enjoy their music. And on that office, incidentally, is a picture of John Coltrane. Train means so much, but we have other great black artists coming right out of Baltimore. Cab Calloway was a product of Baltimore and had to make it in New York. Billie Holiday was the greatest blues singer the world has ever produced, and was so victimized by the system she could hardly survive, has really put it where it is. Soul was created.
But the sounds of Pennsylvania Avenue, which reflect the black man's search for identity, are not all musical. There is, for example, the sound and fury of the spoken word so vividly projected by the man known simply as X.
X meant so much, and I'm talking about Malcolm X, and a lot of people think this is the most controversial person who ever lived in America. But actually, Malcolm X, has a very important place in the hearts and minds of black folks. But Malcolm himself represented, just like John Coltrane and Charlie Bird, a breakaway from contradictions, from myths, from all the hypocrisy in this democracy that is so characteristic of a messed up society. As people listen to Malcolm X and hear his beautiful, down-to-earth talks about how we feel about ourselves and our historical base and where we want to go as a people and how we have to do it ourselves and how you can educate yourself and how we are intelligent and not backward and how we can confirm this thing of identity and culture and our own role and a feeling of group identity, a feeling of cooperativeness that is spreading throughout the inner city of the ghetto areas. We can see that he and Coltrane were saying pretty much the same thing. This is why you don't see too many process heads. That is, where guys are going into barbershops on the avenue or different places and trying to get their head silky straight to be like white folks. You see heads today like mine, and I used to cut mine off. Let's face it, I was ashamed of it. I thought that excessively curly hair was kinky hair, and therefore kinky hair was bad hair. But I find that excessively curly hair doesn't have to be bad hair any more than excessively straight hair is bad hair. It's the head that's under that hair. And therefore you see a lot of heads that are natural. You find a lot of heads that are Afro-American. And black people are not ashamed of themselves anymore. Black people are not ashamed of their blackness. They're proud of their blackness. And you can see this whether you travel Gay Street in the east, Pennsylvania Avenue in the west. Some of the spots where you can really see it, and I think would be probably the highest form, the highest level of these things. If you're black, you can't go there. If you're white, it's the Soul School at 522 North Fremont Avenue. The brothers in there wear tikas, the shikas, and they sell the same. And they don't rob people. They're not setting up an system of exploitation. They've been able to disseminate many symbols about ourselves and about our history and about our African heritage that many of us tried to deny at first. And the brothers there have the same kind of posture that I had seen and had felt in Malcolm X. But this is terribly frightening because what they're saying to the rest of America, to heck with your system, to heck with your values, I dig mine, I dig myself, and this seems to upset a lot of people. And I think on Pennsylvania Avenue, you'll see some black businesses on Pennsylvania Avenue, other than shoe shine parlors. I was very delighted to be able to go into a grocery store on the avenue. Not a night joint, not a nightclub, but a place where they actually sold fresh food, fresh vegetables. And there was another place, and I think it's the 1700 block of Pennsylvania Avenue, where they didn't sell pork, that came from the pig. The old saying about, the Malcolm used to say about the pig, is that we eat too much pig meat. We eat too much pig meat. And we know that pig meat, is a heavy fat that gives you cholesterol. It's not good for your system, but it's cheap meat. But in this place, they sold beef, high-quality beef, high-quality, high-grade meats. And this is in a black place, in a black public accommodations. And when we get these kind of accommodations, people are not running down to run into these places that are open to us downtown. But we like to have that choice, where we can eat in our own neighborhood decently, we can eat in your neighborhood decently, or we can eat in our neighborhood eventually decently. And this can be done, and this can be seen as a turnabout, as a new spiritual awakening. The new spiritual revolution is taking shape and taking form on Pennsylvania Avenue, North Avenue, and its symbols can be seen in the pride and the dignity and the self-respect that easily can be seen by the brothers and the sisters, and possibly can be seen by sensitive whites.
Along the avenue, the black man's search for identity also expresses itself in the Negro's increasing discrimination between men of his own race. Formerly, any Negro who became a sports figure was accepted as a bona fide hero. Today, however, the most respected sports figures are the activists, those who have not only excelled athletically, but spoken out for the black man in general. Among both young and old, special approval is reserved for the man who calls himself
Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, who is actually, in fact, the world's champion, the world's greatest boxer, who has been castrated in his profession by a system who don't even understand it. You see, this man is more than a priest. He's a living spirit of black kids. When he fought some guy who didn't want to call him Muhammad Ali, every time he'd hit him, he said, "What's my name? What's my name?" And you know what? Even though he fought this guy, I think, in the Houston Astrodome, the next day in Baltimore, all the kids were saying, when they made a basket on a basketball court, or when they were shooting marbles and beat the other guy, they'd yell, "What's my name? What's my name?" And this is a beautiful thing, you see, because the black man has been nameless. He's been invisible some places, or he's been characterized as something that he's not. And I think you can see this on any playground in Baltimore today, that the hero will be a Muhammad Ali, whether Big Charlie likes it or not, you know. But if you go to the Civic Center, when Earl the Pearl Monroe plays basketball, and you can see something that has been communicated by Earl the Pearl Monroe, other than his dazzling fast hand and his blazing speed. This fabulous cat also wears an afro. And when you see Bill Russell come out on court, who is a playing coach of the world champion, Boston Celtics, and when you see these guys come out, you know, come out and play basketball at the Civic Center, you can see not only guys standing tall, and by the way, Bill Russell wrote this book, Up for Glory, I believe, and he talks strong about his treatment. He talks beautifully also about his successes and his determination to win. But these guys are standing tall. They're heroes, and they're real father figures and identity images, fine images, not only for young folks, but for me. We all dig them. And I think all Americans dig them because they dig themselves.
But the selection of heroes, a feeling of pride, a search for cultural awareness and identity, all of these things must be augmented by action if the black man is to achieve his goal, social, economic, and political self-sufficiency. This means he must learn to struggle instead of giving in to despair. It means he must meet and work in a positive way instead of turning to riot. Despite the ferment so evident along Pennsylvania Avenue, Walter Carter believes the black man is learning to accept the challenge of community action, and that all will benefit.
Let's clear up something about these officers. You know, what are you talking about the officers for? To sign checks or to sign the corporation papers? What is he talking about?
The officers, from the way I understand what he's reading there, the officers from the president, vice president, all the way down, will be automatically transferred over into the corporation as the same officer. Is that right?
No.
Are you talking about for the chairman of the board?
No,
the board of directors
not
or what?
chairman of the board. It said all.
In the racial caste system in the South, they used to say the only two free people who were there was the white man and the black woman. And that was because the black woman could work in white folks' kitchens, and the black man couldn't even go near the house. And this is just one now, of the reasons why we had a matriarchal system in the black community. And one of the problems we've seen as the black man has moved to freedom, justice, and equality is that we have seen something happen to him spiritually and psychologically. For instance, the meetings that we have now in the communities, in the community councils, we see strong black women there who are beautiful, but we find most of them in a supportive role. And we see more of the young black men standing up, articulating their aspirations and desires, and saying which way they want to go. Black man is no longer sitting there and standing in saying, I'm going to let my woman do my freedom fighting for me. Black man is getting together himself, and they're standing tall. I think this is a very, very important symbol, an indication that there is a healthy thing going on in the black ghetto. And I see these black youth coming along, standing tall, demanding, thinking, dealing with self-help programs, do-it-now programs. And the thing I like about it is the beauty of it is that they're doing it cooperatively, in a spirit of cooperativeness. They say we're doing this together. I'm not trying to outdo you, Joe, and you're not trying to outdo me, brother. We're going to get together, and we're going to stand tall, and this organization is going to be viable. And therefore, this summer in 1968 in Baltimore, with only a few guys and one gal working full-time, we've been able to been able to contribute to the organization of more viable community councils than I think I have witnessed in the last 10 years, working with even more people. And the reason for this is because the people themselves, the potentials, the resources within individuals, the dormant talents that have been dammed up because they've been segregated, humiliated, and devastated, are coming out and expressing themselves. If we can get through the next few months and develop the proposals and keep the councils together, I think that Baltimore is going to be able to look as a symbol for the rest of the country. I think the fact that it's half black, half white, that this will indicate in no uncertain terms that the destiny of the majority is also rest on the salvation and the direction of the minority, and that it is not just a one-way street, that no model city area is an isolated island, independent of the total areas, that the outer city area will say that it's no island, independent of the inner areas. It is like one great big organism. It is not possible for the arms and legs of urban sprawl to continue to survive without a heart. We feel that we got our hands and our pulse on that heart.